Well, hello, everyone. You have landed on the Welcome to the Table live stream, and we have missed you all. This is actually our second series. If you joined us back in the fall, then you know who these amazing ladies are. If you are just new with us, we're just so glad that you're giving us a try, and I want to introduce my friends and colleagues to you. We have Amy Norton. Hey, Amy.
Hi, welcome to everybody. Hello,
Yeah.
Tennessee.
Nashville, that's right. And then we've got Maria Guy. Hey, Maria.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you.
And Maria is from Albuquerque, I'll get it out, New Mexico. And then we have Dr. Jessica Rimmer. Hello, Jessica.
Hey, Tracy. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, Jessica's here in Oklahoma with me. And so we're just so glad that you're here. We're glad that we get to be with you today. And this is just a place where we have relevant conversations for women who are leading people, projects, and progress. So you've come to the right place. And if you are a man and you've landed on this live stream, don't go away. We want you to stay. We want you to stay and chat with us. Let us know your perspective. We want to learn more about you, but for you to learn more about the way that all of us women are thinking around a really fun, relevant topic. So real quick, if you didn't see us last time when we had our series that we did in the fall, we had a various topics that we kind of talked about there. If you don't have a free account with Giant yet, you need to do it. Go to giant.tv/ and then if you know one of these ladies, put their name at the end of that /. So giant.tv/ Amy Norton or / Maria Guy or / Jessica Rimmer. That will allow you to have a free Ascend account, and you can go back and watch that entire series from last fall. So as we begin today, you know, we only have 30 minutes, ladies, and we can talk, can't we? So we want to get into this. So Jessica, will you do us a favor and just let us know what this next series is all about?
Thanks, Tracy. Well, we're really excited about it. We have kind of brainstormed and come up with what we consider to be a really strong series, conversation on emotional agility. So defining the terms, what is emotional agility? If you think about what agility is, even in terms of strength training, right? Agility is strength with movement, right? So when we think about emotional agility, we think about the ability to move fluidly between our thoughts and feelings and to understand what both mean and how they inform our reality. So in this series, we're going to be talking about how can we strengthen that? How can we move fluidly between our thoughts and feelings and use both to our advantage as we lead people, projects, and progress?
Love it.
Excellent.
Yeah. So as you all know, in Giant, we use a lot of visual tools, and we've got a main one here that we talk about a lot. So Maria, will you kind of share that with us?
Yes, the tool is Know Yourself to Lead Yourself. We often refer to this as our self-awareness tool, because the more we understand about our tendencies, the parts that are hardwired in us, these are the parts that don't change, the more we begin to understand the patterns of behavior that we have created over the course of our life. And sometimes the actions are a direct consequence of that. And so those actions have consequences that are sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but together all of them shape our reality. And sometimes our reality is healthy and sometimes it is unhealthy. But the more we understand about ourselves, we will know how we are contributing to both the healthy and the unhealthy reality. So that self-awareness piece is really important. And I think the other ladies would agree with me that in our consulting, people think they're more self-aware than they actually are. And there's actually a couple of aspects of self-awareness. There's that first internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. And that internal self-awareness is really clearly seeing yourself, understanding your values, your passions, how you react to things, your feelings, behaviors, all of those, and how they impact other people. So that's internal, really understanding yourself. But external self-awareness is understanding how other people view you. And few people are able to understand themselves both internally and externally. Usually we're good at one or the other. you can develop both with intentionality. So that's why we use that tool over and over. And that infinity loop is because you never graduate from the school of self-awareness, as Steve Cockram says, right? So this is a journey that you're on your entire life. You're learning about yourself, but you're also learning how other people view you. And together, those two create self-awareness, and it is powerful when you truly begin to understand yourself. And today we're going to be talking about specifically emotions and feelings and knowing that about ourselves. So I think it's an aspect, sometimes we're characterized as more emotional than men. And I think we want to explore that a little bit and say, okay, what do we do with all of this knowledge as we begin to develop that? So Amy, can you tell us a little bit more about where we go from here?
Yes. So if we're thinking about knowing ourselves to lead ourselves, what I want us to think about is what emotions are and what they're not. Emotions are not good or bad. In fact, as we engage in this conversation, I want to encourage all of us to engage with a mindset of curiosity and not judgment, because I think very often we can be very judgmental of our emotions and how we feel. What I really want us to focus on is that emotions are information. It's data. It's information that helps us know what to do about something. Emotions are subconscious. So they're actually a response to stimulus. So I touch a hot stove and I feel pain and I say, ouch, because it hurts. So I feel pain. I feel that emotional, maybe I'm frustrated that I've touched that hot stove without thinking clearly. And the feeling that I have definitely causes me to have some kind of reaction, but it's really an interesting place, a point to ponder. To Maria's point about internal self-awareness, we don't always know what we're feeling. We don't always take time to think about what it is that I'm feeling. What is that emotional name that gives me an understanding, that gives me clear information that I can then act on and do something with. So we need to really get confident and competent, really, understanding the continuum of emotions. There's a very different there's a big difference between feeling just contentment versus exuberant joy, and being able to have words that resonate with our way of communicating that help us really know how to name what it is that we're feeling. That's a really good skill set to level up on, I think.
Mm. Oh, and it takes time and intentionality. You're reminding me, Amy, that one of the things that I've been encouraging some of, especially my male clients, is because they a lot of them have this tendency to want to solve their daughters, their wives' problems. They're like, well, why do they tell me if they don't want me to solve it? I said, okay, sometimes they just want you to listen, right? I said, but here's what you need to do, because your mind can't stop just solving the problem. You've got to give your mind something else to do. I said, I want you to work really hard to identify the emotion that the person on the other side of you is expressing. Are they angry? Are they passionate? Are they sad? Whatever it is. And I said, and then I want you to feed it back to them. Say, wow, your coworker is really lucky to have someone who's so passionate about that. And I said, and that's it. That's all you're supposed to do. I said, come back to me and tell me the reaction. And I get a couple of chuckles sometimes because they think, all right, I'll try it. And when they come back, they're like, oh my gosh, my wife didn't know what to say because I was listening just to identify that emotion. But when you practice, you do get better at it. To your point, Amy, sometimes we don't know what to call it, but if you practice, maybe sometimes it's easier to detect on someone else than identify your own emotional state, but intentionality really helps us get better at that.
It sure does.
Oh, sorry, Amy. I was just going to say, and what you said earlier, Amy, also about curiosity. And to your point, I think there's a such thing as intentional curiosity, right? So I think we have this opportunity to go, I'm wondering if, because sometimes people, they aren't sure, and maybe we're not sure, related to that continuum, Amy. How intensely are they feeling something? We're seeing something and we're interpreting it with a level of intensity. But, I'm wondering if you're feeling, a lot of anxiety about how your coworker is responding, or, you know what I mean? Like, ask questions about how they're feeling and mirror it so that they can respond to something. And by doing that, I think we increase their internal self-awareness, right? Like, oh, maybe I am feeling that more deeply than I thought I was, especially if someone's wired up like me to be a little bit feelings ignorant, right? Like if you have bought off on the idea that feelings aren't helpful, then you've blinded yourself to a whole, plethora of data, which is that feelings inform us. And so anyway, that's a whole other thing. I hope I didn't take us off course, Tracy.
No, you're good. What were you going to say, Amy?
There's so many things I want to respond to there. I think it's good to wonder and to be curious about what other people are feeling, and to say, it looks like you're feeling anxious about that, but then also saying, is that right? Because we don't know. And if we give the other person a chance to say yes or no, and if it's not, it helps them actually have something to calibrate off of. I'm not feeling anxious, I'm just feeling a little restless maybe. So there actually is value in having those collaborative conversations with others. And I also think it's important to do that with ourselves first, to really be able to understand the continuum of things that we feel and the emotions that we have, because that makes us better able to recognize and have clear words to ask questions of others, I think. So that curiosity, internal and external, I think are both really important.
That's good.
I think it's important to recognize that we're not all comfortable doing that, and that's okay, but it is a good thing to get better at having those conversations. So wherever you are, perhaps, the way you grew up or the places that you've worked may have discouraged that kind of talk or conversation, but it is good to begin to understand if we're going to have that agility that Jessica was talking about.
Yes. And Jessica, I loved how you described agility as strength and movement. And it makes me think of the conversations my husband and I have had about this topic. He's a pioneer, I'm a nurturer, and he jokes saying that he has one emotion and I have all the rest. And I've actually respectfully pushed back on that. That's actually not accurate. You have all of the emotions. You may just not have a great vocabulary yet to define how you're feeling about all that. And he bristled a little bit at that suggestion, but it does make us think about the differences between men and women and personality types and how we approach the whole subject. Emotions are messy. You can't always gauge what emotion is going to surface around a particular idea or topic or situation. So we develop strength and the ability to move and be agile if we learn to identify what's underneath all of that.
That's good. I'm kind of in Will's camp. I kind of think I've sort of maybe suppressed some of my emotions, thinking that, well, that gives me strength, the fact that I can just kind of cut off things. And that brings us to this slide I definitely want us to kind of dig into. Amy, will you explain the oughts and shoulds?
Yes. I love thinking about this. If you think about your own narrative and your own story, there are lots of external influences that shape how we are experienced and how we look at life, the lens we look through. So if you think through where you grew up, I grew up in a small town in Mississippi. There's some oughts and shoulds that go along with growing up in that part of the world. And I've grown up with two parents and a brother. My family of origin has had an impact on me. Some amazing teachers and bosses along the way. I have had lots of dreams, some successes and certain failures along the way, and parenting history. All of these things have an incredible shaping impact on how we view ourselves and how we view the world. And sometimes we can have some limiting beliefs based on an experience that we've had, or maybe a truth that's been spoken over us. So, maybe part of Will's story is that he's a guy, he's supposed to just be tough and not show emotion. Maybe that's a myth that we need to debunk, and that women are too emotional. Is that true? That we can really think through those oughts and shoulds and begin to understand where some of those things come from, and then decide this adds value or I need to release that thought. And that actually makes us a little more agile to recognize where that feeling is coming from.
That's good, Amy. And I think these oughts and shoulds, they're, depending on your wiring, they're either confirming the way you're wired and we get an affirmation, or it's a conflict and we're getting the message that we're not doing it right. And because I, like Tracy mentioned, not overly emotional. And so the message sometimes I've received is, you should be. why aren't you feeling more? Why aren't you more upset at me? And I think, well, I don't know. It's just, I'm not moved by that, or I'm not as emotional about it. And if we don't understand ourselves, we carry that as that's bad.
Mhm.
I am not, handling this right. I'm not doing this emotion thing right. But if I know myself, then I'm able to pivot. I'm able to move, and because I have awareness of myself, and I don't have to carry guilt or shame over it for not being a certain way that I ought to be or I should be. So part of this whole self-awareness piece and understanding the oughts and shoulds, the messages that we've been received, then gives us enough information to move forward in a very intentional way. What do I need to do in this situation? I may not feel as bad, but I probably need to be more compassionate towards that person because they do feel bad, and not tell them, oh, cut it out, or stop, or it's not that bad. Or that's where we get ourselves into trouble, when we don't recognize, because we're not feeling it.
I think the deep irony of the whole, like, we're thinkers and we're wired up to be thinkers, and so then the work environment affirms our wiring, Maria and Tracy, to that. The deep irony is our intolerance of feelings is actually rooted in a feeling, right? Like, I feel out of control when things get emotional. Therefore, I'm not going to have emotions, right? It's like a strong denial tendency that we have, that we don't have feelings. Like, it just isn't true, right? Like, if you're alive, if you're breathing, you are feeling something.
Yes.
And so I think that piece of it is really challenging, right? Like, that it's also, I think, like, it's a holdover of, like, Greek Hellenistic philosophies influence on how our world has been built. Like, that's not everywhere in the world. And I think we're way beyond holding to this, like, feelinglessness, or whatever that would be, is a virtue. It's not, right? It's not a virtue. And if we're not really authentic in who we are, tuned in, emotionally agile, we're not going to be able to pivot into the new demand of the work environment, which, as we all know, is be empathetic, lean in. Well, now we could be faking that, or affirming another portion of the population without really helping us become integrated, self-aware, leaders worth following. We're just going to do a different set of oughts and shoulds now that empathy is in vogue. Right.
I love what Fritz just put in the comment about emotions not being a show of weakness. And I think that's spot on, men or women, that agility in the workplace is one of the most desirable attributes you can bring. So agility requires that you deal with your emotions and that you're nimble and understanding. So you're exactly right, Fritz. It is not a show of weakness. I think that's really smart.
So I'm curious, what would you say to that person who's listening, like me, who realizes, I really push down my emotions and I'm not emotionally agile. I tend toward this, what's your suggestion? What do we do?
I think that you start with recognizing when you do feel something, and that tendency you have to say, stop. If you're feeling, sad about something, and, suck it up, and say, no, I just want to sit in the sadness for a little bit and observe myself. I tell clients, become students of yourself. When you start feeling something, don't be quick to move to the next thing or to fix it. Just observe. It's going to be messy, but just observe, put a name to it. Just start there. You may want to not be there too long and move, quickly. But if you can at least begin to pause, you're going to discover that you're feeling a lot more than you realize that you're feeling, because you've never given yourself really permission to just observe. Maybe you may not feel as much or as intensely as someone else does. But as Jessica said, if you're alive, you're feeling something. And it's good to pause and reflect, what would I call that? Interesting, before you move on. And that's the developing self-awareness piece is where we stop and observe ourselves just for a little while to see what we would call it before we move too fast to the next thing.
And just to add on to that, some encouragement for my 3 colleagues who are thinkers, and any of you out there who don't like even thinking about, I don't want to think about how I feel. It makes me feel weird. You really only need about 90 seconds. Neurologically, when you get an emotional impulse to process, if you will take Maria's advice and pause and observe what you're feeling and just think about where am I feeling it? When I feel nervous, I feel it in my belly. When I feel tense, I feel it in my where is the feeling coming from? What's behind that? 90 seconds of some good question asking and reflection, and the wave of that emotion, especially if it's strong, generally will pass. So you don't have to think about sitting in a corner, for hours on end being reflective. Give yourself 90 seconds. I think any of us can do that.
That's good. I can do 90 seconds.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I have a really good comment. Sorry, Jessica, let me read this comment and then I'll let you go. A LinkedIn user, we don't know who this is. They said, this is social emotional learning for adults. We teach kids, but as we become adults, we forget about ourselves and the importance of naming feelings. And that is so true, isn't it?
That is very true. I recently had an experience where I was speaking at an event and my husband traveled with me to this event. And I always get just right before I go on, even though I'm very confident, whatever it is I regret accepting the invitation. I tell my husband, I hate public speaking. It's the worst thing ever. I don't know what I'm doing here. I should just run away. And he just looked at me like, are you serious? And I said, this happens every time. I just kind of have to process through it, and then once I get that, it's just like, and yeah, I came back and he said, how'd it go? I said, it went great. It always goes great. But that split second right before where I just had to process, I hate this. Why do I accept the invitations ever? I don't know what I'm doing, and then wait a second.
Okay, I have to just jump in and say the same thing happens to me. And I had a friend tell me when I said, I'm so nervous. Why do I ever put myself in these positions? And she said, you're not nervous. You're excited. You're a racehorse at the beginning of a race, and the light bulb went off. Anxiety and excitement are the same feeling, just presented in a different way. So shifting my mindset from worry to let me be excited about this made all the difference in the world.
Really good.
Little Julie right there learning to do that.
I love it.
I was just going to go back to the LinkedIn comment in terms of assigning language. And I got this from Amy, right? Like, I think everything that we learn and really believe in, it comes from, like, I needed to learn this first. Before I went out and spoke on a stage, before I went out and told my clients, it was like, I needed to learn this. And really the rub for me came from, we do so well at work and we're so professionals, we're put our blazers on, and I get home and I'm like a crazy person with my children. And I'm going, okay, well, those feelings are clearly coming out and it has nothing to do with you, but kids are all feel. They don't have a filter for what they can accept and what they need to reject and all of that. And so I thought, I have to get a handle on this. I have to be able to give language, to understand the intensity. And I have to even be able to do that with my kids, for my kids. So if I'm going to be a good leader at home, I have to get a handle on leading myself in this way. And so I just had to go like, all right, the crazy mama's got to go away. I have to get some ability to name these feelings and understand why they're coming out so intensely. Why does that drive me? You're yelling, your over the topness drive me so crazy to anger. I need to back up and understand myself in that. And so I think, we do it with our employees too, right? I can't believe they would just, we see this in consultants and they're railing on their employees, lack of professionalism or performance expectation, execution issues. And they're telling me all the feelings and judging their employee, right? They're putting all their feelings on the employee and they don't know how to navigate even a liberating conversation because they haven't liberated their feelings yet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No,
that's
so
so good. Yeah, that's so good. Goodness, Jessica, you're taking me back to when my babies were young, and you don't even think you think, oh, I have some emotions until you have children, and then you're like, oh, wah. And I remember when my boys were little, I had star charts for cleaning your room and all that, and I finally sat them all down one day and I said, boys, mommy is making a star chart for mommy, because I'm losing my temper too much. And so I had a big chart on my refrigerator and they would go, uh-oh, mom, lost your you lost your temper and you lost your star today. And but it was a good visual for me to hold myself accountable during the day with my emotions. So maybe that's it. Maybe all my emotions were spin up in that 20 years, and now they're all gone.
It's actually a great example of developing agility. It's that awareness piece and observing, and then creating some kind of process to do something different, to lead yourself in a different way.
Yeah.
Jessica, I'm curious, what do you do? What's your strategy now that you've become aware and you know that you come home with a tendency to do whatever it is that you do related to your kids that's different from work? What have you done to develop some agility around that? I think that's probably something we all think about, being in the work world and then coming home to whatever that situation is. What's your strategy there?
Well, Maria used the term permission to feel, which is a great book Amy recommended to me. And first, I think the first strategy was like, I gave myself permission to feel my feelings. Like, I'm feeling really like a failure. Like, I'm feeling like that meeting with that CEO went terrible and I didn't add value, right? Like, understanding what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling it, and just kind of like disconnecting that from them, and then also giving them permission to have a bad day, right? Like, I had to kind of like decouple their feelings and my feelings and not put it in this whole soup of what the end of the day looked like, so that I could lead myself and have compassion for their day, right? Like, it's like I could do that for everybody else, but what about them? And this is really silly, but because I was such a like F student on feelings, I had to just go like, that's really hard. You know what you said, Maria, about like identifying the feeling and mirroring it back, rather than like trying to stop it and shut it down.
Yes.
In myself or in them.
Yes.
Going, gosh, you seem really sad. You seem like that sounds really hard. And like actually leaning into it versus like, stop whining, right? Like, that's what I want to say. And I should say it to myself first, right? Like, because the internal monologue is whiny, but it's like, stop. Kids don't work like that. And really adults don't either. Like an ounce of compassion for ourselves, I think, will go a mile for our ability to be healthy and to be authentically whole, right? That's the goal, that we would be whole. And we can't do that without thoughts or feelings.
That's a beautiful description of empathy and self-empathy before we can really express empathy for other people. That's a really important aha, I think, that it has to happen with us first if we're going to be able to be any good at it with other people.
And it's going to take practice, right? To go from, the extremes of wallowing in every emotion and suppressing them. And somewhere in between is this right way of addressing them, feeling them, recognizing them, naming them, allowing other people to have theirs, to recognize that, to be compassionate. But it takes practice. Wherever you are, it's going to take practice. We all are navigating that road right now and trying to figure out, what do we need to do to move forward, to lead ourselves in a way that shapes the kind of healthy reality we want at home, at work, and in every other relationship that we have. It just takes practice.
Absolutely. Yeah. Speaking of practice, Amy, actually our time has gone so fast. I knew it would go fast, but I didn't think it would go this fast. This is so good. I could stay on here for a long, long time, but help us, Amy, give us some homework or some challenge so that we can take what we've learned in these few minutes and apply it.
Absolutely. So we really believe and highly value practical application. So we've had a fun chat, and that's great. But what are we going to do with it? The four of us here and the rest of you listening. So actionable, concrete things that we can look back on and see, yeah, this is making a difference. So we want to invite you all to think through, and maybe Maria's continuum is a good place to start. So if you think about wallowing and suppressing, which end do I fall on? Maybe even overreacting, underreacting, however you want to look at it. But consider the continuum of where you are on that continuum. And I want you to think back to a time when you had an emotional response to something that didn't go well. And I want you to think through what you could do differently. So I'll even think back to that Know Yourself to Lead Yourself tool and what was happening. Take your observation pause for 90 seconds, understand and give some definition to what you were feeling that caused you to act in a particular way. And if it was a negative consequence and your reality was not what you wanted, put it in reverse and redo it. What could you do differently to manage yourself to have a different outcome the next time? So we want to invite you to do that and come back ready to share next week as we continue this conversation. I know we will all be true to that. I have opportunities to practice all the time. So there's no lack of that, because right?
And this is a 4-part series. So please come back for the next 4 sessions. This is the first one. Our 5th one on the 28th of April, we're going to do live consulting. So if you want 4 consultants to solve your problems for free, come on the 28th. We will be taking questions and just issues and process them live. And you'll be one of our clients. So hang in there during these next 4 sessions, and then come back on the 28th for live processing.
I love that. That's worth the price of admission right there. So that's great. Well, thank you, ladies. This was fun and challenging at the same time. So thank you. And we'll see all of you next Wednesday, same time, same place. Thanks, everyone.